Hello, and welcome to today's webcast. I appreciate everyone joining us. My name is Dina Evans. I'm the Marketing Special Events Manager here at Lookingglass Cyber Solutions. Today's presentation is on how are you managing cyber risks from your third-party relationships. And our presenter for today's session is Ryan Curran. He's our Senior Sales Engineer here at Lookingglass. But before we get started, I wanted to point out a couple quick things to our audience members to make sure that you understand the BrightTalk platform. Please note that there is a chat feature that all of you should have in your viewer screen. If you have any questions at all, feel free to submit them through that chat feature so that we can address them before the end of the webcast. And also note that everyone that's on today, all of you guys are muted, so if you have any questions, you have to make sure to give it to us through the chat screen. If at any point that we run out of time and we can't address all the questions, please understand that we will contact you directly at the conclusion of today's webcast to make sure that they get answered. So we're not going to leave anyone hanging at all. And also make sure that you note the section for the attachments and links. And peruse those items. We've got a great data sheet and a press release for you guys to view, so make sure that you do see that feature on your screen as well. So at this point, I think it's time. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ryan Curran and let him get started on today's webcast. Ryan, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dina. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today, we'll be discussing the increasing interconnectedness of your cyber ecosystems. More importantly, the risks inherent in granting access of your network and your data to those third parties. While these connections are a necessary evil of extending your business and maintaining operation continuity, your capacity to monitor those third parties also needs to evolve. The days of security checklists are over, and there is a pressing need to have an assessment capability to assure your exposure is limited. We'll cover where we're at in the industry, the problems facing us, and possible solutions to push us in the right direction. As we all know, our cyber assets are under assault by a host of bad guys with varying nefarious purposes. Our teams, at the same time, are also resource constrained. And then extending them into the realm of oversight of your third parties compounds the problem by adding extra tasking. So without proper capabilities, processes, and policies in place to manage these external connections, we are putting ourselves at greater risk by inadvertent exposure. As you see here by these statistics, they back up this well-known conundrum. So the need to rely on third-party assets while minimizing risk. As you see here, 80% of breaches originate within the supply chain, and the overall number of third-party incidents is only increasing. So how does this affect you? Third-party risk really includes any risk associated by granting access to any of your organization that's outside of your corporate structure. So that includes a myriad of suppliers, vendors, partners, and applications that your organization utilizes for operations and support of your internal and external customers. As noted here, government organizations such as the FDIC and the Treasury's OCC deem it a required capacity for your organization to, quote-unquote, practice effective risk management with your handling of your data. This language extends that responsibility outside of your borders, effectively making you responsible for the actions of others or their lack of action. So let's discuss for a minute the old paradigm of cybersecurity that predominated up until a few years ago. The previous security approach is what I like to term castle and moat. So this meant that an organization predominantly focused on building up their own defenses, the castle, as high as they could, and then as deep as possible, the moat. So this approach toward third parties primarily relied on a check-the-box approach with yearly surveys and or occasional site visits. So what was wrong with this approach? Well, it was internally focused, first of all, and it was nearsighted. It really didn't take into account the variables outside of their own wall. So, for example, castles could be starved out if need be from the outside. It doesn't provide you the necessary visibility into your third party's operations to know where their risks are. Relying on them to report security breaches only incentivizes them to underreport so they don't get on your bad side. This paradigm does not provide the necessary visibility into their security posture to really understand their risk profile and therefore their potential impact on you. In the castle and moat example, a third party is the knight who didn't answer the call to arms, leaving the castle undermanned and vulnerable. So we've had to evolve past that. Checklists. Checklists do not guarantee appropriate security measures are in place. In most cases, I would argue, they don't even verify that the third party can adequately assess their own security posture. If I can't address my own attack vectors, how can my provider also address theirs? So adding new third parties to your organization's ecosystem only increases your organization's attack surface. Email is a good example. Your employees are more likely to trust email from a known third party, which opens the potential for more phishing attacks every time you add a new third-party vendor or supplier. The bottom line is that organizations need better protection from third-party risks than surveys and site visits. But what's really at stake here? By not taking a more proactive approach towards your third parties, you're extending your risk, opening yourself up to new vulnerable points, and potentially real money lost. So that's really the cost. Here you see the logos of well-known breaches that have occurred because of inadequate third-party security over the last few years. In this case, threat actors use third parties to get access to customer data of these organizations, the logos you see. I won't belabor the point because they've been well documented in the media, but I thought it was prudent to at least remind ourselves that even large corporations with large security budgets can fall prey to weak links. And there are real-life repercussions that can affect you. You see here the quote from the Financial Times, in which share prices dropped of the corporation after penalties were levied against them because of lacking cybersecurity policies. So there's several outcomes. There's the embarrassment of your name being splashed across the media. There's damage to your brand and reputation. There's potential loss of market share. And there's a financial burden due to risk from your third parties. These points all further underline the importance of having insight into your third parties' activities to alleviate your risk and potential exposure. More interconnected business relationships are just a fact of life. They're not going away. So we really have to adapt our security posture to realize that situation. The third parties have increasing access to your networks and your data, which makes them even more popular targets for threat actors. Those third parties of yours are considered to be soft targets because, in general, they have smaller budgets than you do, and they are even more resource constrained than you are. So this means the potential for security risks and vulnerabilities is even higher in their environment. Because these are outside of your control, it necessitates having greater vigilance in monitoring them from an outside-in perspective. Your ability to have greater visibility and understanding of their risk enables you to have a more informed policy for your own security operations and how you interact with those third parties. As stated here, companies spend a significant amount of money to secure their data assets, and the cost of a data breach is even higher. So limiting your exposure is key. Low security thresholds make threat actors' jobs easy for them. In this case, using weak passwords provides an easy vector for threat actors to exploit your third parties and their endeavors to access your network or data. Default, simple, or weak passwords used across multiple systems is an easy access point for actors to start their probing. What you see here is the result of Lookingglass's Cyber Threat Intelligence Group analysis of breach data from hacks that they've collected from the last 10 plus years. So the CT group uses automated and ad hoc methodologies to collect this data from a variety of dump and post sites, social media, and dark web and deep web sources, including IRC channels. So what they've done is they've analyzed the most used passwords in their repository, again, 10 plus years worth of data. As you can see, these are very weak passwords. The word password itself has been seen over 2.5 million times in that repository. The winner, the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at over 23 million times. These types of missteps provide threat actors easily guessed credentials to try when attempting to breach your systems or those of your third-party vendors. These are just simple examples of ways in which you are being put at risk by not having a more holistic third-party monitoring approach. So which of your vendors have low password security policies? Do you know? Can you verify? There's a lot of process that goes into place into making sure their security policies are in place so that your security policies are in place. Which, of course, brings us to establishing a new paradigm. So your third-party monitoring program cannot rely on simple checklists devoid of verification mechanisms. Instead, your program should be constructed around the concept of continuous monitoring. To accomplish this, you will need capabilities that enable you to have visibility into the network infrastructure of your third-party suppliers and vendors. Employing open source and commercially available threat intelligence feeds is a good basis for understanding what publicly available information is reporting about your third-party networks. Expanding past that, the incorporation of other internet intelligence information is preferable, which will provide you more data about the risks and vulnerabilities within their infrastructure. This would include issues such as unpatched systems that are vulnerable, essentially CVEs. Also included would be anomalous domains resolving to their IP space, as well as phishing campaigns or DDoS attacks that are being planned against them, say in an IRC channel where a threat actor is planning a DDoS against them in the next week and you rely on that vendor for uptime. So why are these types of data sets important? It's because these additions give you a more holistic insight into your third party's true risk assessment. The benefit of this approach is not dependent on information they choose to provide or choose not to provide. Since you are the driver of this monitoring, you are more autonomous in your process and can create a clearer environment for your own mitigation policies in relation to your third parties. Once you've spun up these capabilities to perform passive monitoring, the use cases and reporting derived from that are very useful. They include third-party benchmarking and risk scoring, due diligence during the new third-party selection process by scoring vendors before you even have them on contract, and in general, better insight to inform your policy management. On this last point, having a variety of metrics at your fingertips about the scores of threats and the classifications of threats, as well as the duration of time between infection and remediation, allows you to create third-party specific mitigation policies if you really choose to be that granular about it. So, discovering your attack surface. More access points ultimately equals more potential points of failure. But how do you define those points? The first step is performing passive monitoring to discover and define your own attack surface, which would include your larger ecosystem. So it's important to track where you're connected to your third parties, where you're potentially vulnerable, and what data lies at those endpoints. Or conversely, from the outside in, what systems or services are those third parties running for you on your behalf that may impact your business operation? Your attack surface is defined as, quote, the total number of points or vectors through which an attacker can try to enter an environment. In cybersecurity, the concept applies to ways an attacker could send data to and or extract data from a network. End quote. Also consider the fact that a threat actor has tools to enumerate your attack surface to determine access points and, once inside, will attempt lateral movements to other networks and attempt to gain access to more data. At a minimum, you should have the capability to replicate what a threat actor can see about your attack surface using open source tools and data. Another quote from Wired tells us, attack surface awareness is no security panacea, but understanding how a network's exposure relates to its risk of being breached gives a lot of valuable context. in the process of onboarding new third parties, considering asking them to perform an assessment of their own attack surface, including their third-party supplier, vendors, and partners. Judging their findings, they provide you valuable insight into their internal security maturity. And if you're already doing passive monitoring, you can actually verify their findings about themselves. Footprinting. Here, footprinting is the gathering of information about a specific network, organization, or ecosystem regarding their network infrastructure, the systems or apps running in that environment, and or the attack service that a threat actor could piece together through publicly available means. So in general, reconnaissance. Here are some, on the slide, you'll see information security aspects that you may want to include in your next footprinting exercise. These are in no particular order, and I say no particular order because each footprinting exercise is different based on the vendor, what they're providing, and how you value that service. Value that service internally. It's also important to consider appropriately scoping your efforts. So questions like, how important is a third party to your day-to-day operations? How much access to your networks do they have? What type of data do they have access to? Are they themselves targeted a lot by other threat actors? All these types of questions and answering them internally will lessen the burden of your resources and help you understand which footprinting techniques to deploy for each of your third parties, therefore decreasing your alert fatigue. Ultimately, the value of combining internet intelligence and threat intelligence will provide the most holistic view of what your third-party risk posture projects as. Internet intelligence is simply data sets about the global internet itself, such as BGP routing, announcement structures, network hierarchies, network registration, geolocation, host enumeration, PDNS, whois, and there's a slew more. The capability that is derived from having this internet intelligence, however, is the enablement of third-party monitoring. With this type of information at your fingertips, you can actually monitor a single IP or multiple collections of disparate network elements that you feel are important to you in some fashion. So this allows you to monitor large amounts of network space as customizable singular units of analysis. So for example, you can monitor a single IP that is your external mail server, a collection of IPs that are your cloud-based apps, a whole CIDR that has a data center full of your PII run by a third party, a whole autonomous system that is a partner of yours, or even all the networks of your competitors for benchmarking purposes. As previously stated, appropriate scoping is key. You can be more granular if you choose and monitor only the specific IPs that connect to yours or your third party's network infrastructure, essentially the infrastructure that's performing services on your behalf. If one of your vendors is a high criticality business operation partner that has multiple access points, then you may consider monitoring their entire infrastructure to provide a broader picture of their overall risk posture versus, say, a vendor that has a specific application which has little access to your network or sensitive data. So there's varying levels of importance of your vendors to you, and that obviously keys off how you want to monitor them in return. The inclusion of threat intelligence is also highly relevant. I'm sure many of you here have already considered utilizing threat intelligence feeds to augment your security operations teams. Operationalizing those threat intelligence feeds complements a number of existing processes that you're probably already engaged in. So that's a good basis to start with. The important thing to keep in mind here is the vetting of the sources of threat intel you're utilizing and obtaining data from a variety of sources and collection methods. Just getting all open source feeds is not valuable. Just getting all commercially available feeds may not be valuable. Having the right mix of those separate types of feeds, collections, and the way they collect gives you a broader picture of the publicly available information about various infrastructures you're interested in. On top of all that, you need to score all those data feeds to maximize their value by operationalizing them to fit your own needs and your own mission. So ultimately, by combining internet intelligence and threat intelligence, you can tackle continuous monitoring of your third parties, as well as expand your horizon to look at larger initiatives you may be interested in. For example, you can monitor your entire sector or vertical. Doing this would allow you to track threat intelligence trends aligning against your space that may not have impacted you yet, essentially allowing you to get out ahead of patient zero infection. Or if nothing else, use it just to provide you greater situational awareness of trending threats unique to your space or your vertical or your sector. At a minimum, your third parties should be providing you a cyber asset inventory of IP ranges of theirs that you can passively monitor for alerting purposes. I've listed a number of questions to consider here when engaging with your third parties. I won't read them out to you, I'll let you read them. But the primary point here is that internal deliberations on your end must be made to establish protocols and procedures about each one of your third-party vendors. Many of the questions here ultimately deal with the understanding of the attack surface of your ecosystem, properly scoping the third-party access based on the relative business necessity of your operations, and of course, the combination of internet intelligence and threat intelligence to improve your policy decision-making in terms of acceptable thresholds of risk. As I said, each third party is different, right? They're all unique snowflakes that have some impact on your business operation. Some require access to sensitive systems or data of yours, while others do not. Some of the vendors have mature approaches to managing cybersecurity, while others do not. This matrix really just helps define what level of engagement you should have with your third-party vendors when you interact with them. So obviously it's a generalized framework for allocating your cybersecurity resources amongst the diverse range of supply chain partners. Again, making that internal determination of each of your third parties' necessity to your operations is critical, because really that basis will assist you in determining your level of threat management effort. Really, your level of activity here can range from periodic ad hoc assessment all the way across the spectrum to active third-party defense with a whole host or range of activities in between. So for the in-between activities, for example, you could opt for greater interaction with your supply chain security team, or help them mature the security programs by lending your expertise, or even by creating collaborative intel sharing environments amongst your entire ecosystem. Protecting only your controlled assets is really insufficient in today's interconnected ecosystem structure. Ecosystems have really outgrown the outdated castle and moat security paradigm, and a more mature cybersecurity approach really must include third-party risk assessment. So simple checkboxes are not sufficient anymore. Passive monitoring is a component for accumulating data about your third parties and by extension your own ecosystem. If you can't discover and define your larger attack surface, it diminishes your capacity to protect it. Footprinting and running a continuous monitoring program will enable baselining, continuous alerting, trending, and educated mitigation strategies to lower the overall risk your organization is taking on when interacting with these third parties. So we've discussed the issues, and this is how Lookingglass approaches the solution. So Lookingglass developed and employs several technology platforms to task, create, collect, and aggregate intel data feeds that support and augment third-party oversight from a more holistic approach. By utilizing the data and contextualization these platforms generate, you can achieve a larger picture assessment of your third party's risk profile from a variety of aspects. Not just what a feed says about their IPs, but really seeing a deep dive into where their vulnerable points are. Workflow automations send alerts and prioritize the incidents that are defined by you to be the most relevant so that you are dealing with the incidents or potential incidents that really are going to have an impact on your business operations, your bottom line, and ultimately the cost you pay out for those types of resources. So why is this approach important? Because this broader spectrum approach gives you a more complete view of your vendors and the risks associated with them, and by extension, yourself. It is really imperative to know more, but in a simplified manner. get evidence of system compromise or infection, see when there are leaked credentials or compromised user accounts, see what vulnerabilities are running on which systems in an environment, view your vendor's domain portfolio and assess their spear phishing risk, and really be aware of online indications and warnings. See if someone is planning an attack against your ecosystem, and be proactive. These are all important aspects of understanding where a third party is vulnerable and how that can be used against you to get at you. Unlike other risk assessment reports currently in the marketplace, this type of analysis, this breadth of data types, really extends beyond vulnerabilities and network issues to provide a real, actionable intelligence on your third parties. And finally, understand what these data points mean and why they're important to you in a simple way. Have access to the data, but have the technology filter out all the noise. What you need is the analysis simplified to the end result. What I mean by this is you take a global approach to intelligence, internet intelligence plus threat intelligence, but with the capacity to make it more focused if you so choose. So for example, the graphs that are showcased here illuminate two different data sets that could be useful in vendor assessment. Number one, on the left, is a very recent CVE broken out by state, wherein we utilize geolocation and network registration data of IPs to create the breakdown. Graph number two, on the right, performed a snapshot of botnet activity within one U.S. government-defined CICAR sector to look at the specific botnets operating in that sector at that time. This also incorporates internet intelligence in the form of network hierarchies and network registration, as well as multi-source threat intelligence and metadata in the form of threat classifications and threat scores. These kinds of breakdowns would not be possible without first incorporating a global approach to intelligence, then refining it to your specific needs and reporting demands. This slide is simply showcasing the capacity of Lookingglass's technology platform to monitor massive amounts of IP space as single units and to instantly correlate threat intelligence to those spaces. Again, for the sake of demonstration, we have footprinted the U.S. government-defined CICAR sectors, but this is really flexible and fully customizable. So it could be a subnet of your own network, it could be your whole network, it could be the networks of your third parties, subsets of those, etc. Again, having the capacity to craft and monitor networks of interest to you is really what's key here. Okay, threat contextualization, tick scoring, and reporting. All right, so incorporating threat feeds is a good starting point for any security organization. However, pushing forward really requires you to contextualize that information in relation to other data sets that are out there. So it further requires you to catalog those sources, the feeds of those sources, and the indicators being reported by each feed in a nomenclature and data quantification that is both universal as well as distinct to your mission. Lookingglass's Scout Prime Threat Intelligence Management Platform provides those capabilities as a core competency of the technology. Our subject matter experts score every source, every classification of indicator, as well as each individual indicator. And then on top of that, we use that as a basis for the scoring algorithm, which defines and scores the entire internet. We make this scoring transparent to you, the user, and we make that customization based on your mission. So you can customize essentially the scores of sources, indicators, and classifications, so that way you're ensuring you're alerted on and can integrate with other tools to really meet your end goal demands of your mission. The upper screenshot shows you your ability to interact with that algorithm and customize it to meet your specific operational needs. So what this tick scoring does, which stands for Threat Indicator Competence, is essentially scores the internet, as I said. One of Lookingglass's key differentiators in the marketplace is that we have constructed a global topology map of the public-facing internet. This allows you, the end user, to look up any network element you want on a global scale. Any domain, say a particular IP in Europe, a whole CIDR in Ukraine, a whole autonomous system, entire organization, say one of your third parties, or if you wanted even an entire country you could look up. This internet intelligence availability allows you to be either micro or macro in your approach towards scoping of attack surface monitoring, or even allows greater visibility into malicious infrastructures out there on the global internet, say a botnet infrastructure or the infrastructure of a threat actor group that's targeting your sector. These three components, internet intelligence, plus threat intelligence, plus the tick scoring algorithm that score the entire internet, really allows you to have quick visibility into the potential risk of your connection to a domain or an IP or an entire network. And ultimately, reporting is derived from that correlation. So the lower screenshot shows that the Scout Prime, the lower screenshot shows the Scout Prime platform monitoring millions of IPs or single units. In this case, the collection of analysis are the state care sectors of the government facilities, financial services, and critical manufacturing sectors. The numbers underneath each name represent the overall score for the entire collection based on the threats that are active inside of it. So again, the platform is instantly scoring every network element that is part of the collection and providing you a rolled-up score in dashboard form. And with that, I just want to give a little time for Q&A as well. That relates to third party and potential mechanisms for monitoring that and, diminishing your risk.
Yeah, Ryan, it looks like there's a few that have come in. So let me start here. Here's one. It says, how am I supposed to monitor my third parties if they won't allow me to put sensors in their network? Can you address that, Ryan?
Sure. As I said during the presentation, that's exactly correct. You want to be autonomous or not dependent upon your third parties to provide you that information. So one of the beauties of continuous passive monitoring, which Lookingglass Technology allows, is that you are autonomous from those types of collection mechanisms. So our technology is collecting information passively or from open source or commercially available data sets to create that topology map of the internet. We also have honeynests and run trace routes and things like that that help complement that data set and provide some confidence in it. But we're not dependent upon having sensors in people's networks to collect that data. So you can essentially look up any organization or internet infrastructure you'd like. So what this really allows is the generation and aggregation of various risk and threat information about those infrastructures that would ultimately provide you that risk assessment. So ultimately, we don't have to rely on sensors to provide us topology information.
Okay. Here's another one that's just come in. Let's see. It says, how do I know how to appropriately scope a third party I'm monitoring? What would you say about that?
Sure. So yes, this one is tricky simply because each vendor is different, and one vendor may work with two different people, but they have different impacts on those organizations. Excuse me. So ultimately, there needs to be some internal decision-making process that allocates a value to the various vendors that work with you. And you may break them down by category. You may have a bunch of payment processors, and you have cloud providers, and then you have data center providers, and you have various vendor types. Or it may be, the value may be in relation to, their interconnectedness, if you will, with your network or your data. So again, if they have access to a lot of networks or data, they have a higher value. Or if they're accessing a data point where you don't have the network segmented off and there's a higher potential for lateral movement, that has a higher value to you. So it is tricky. You really have to consider what data is available, what you're sharing with them, what's available at those endpoints, what the potential risk is if a bad guy did happen to get in. But ultimately, again, you're sort of defining what that attack surface is, and then having the ability to monitor those attack surface endpoints at different levels is really the value here. And then again, obviously getting the reporting out of that so that you can further refine your micro or macro approaches simultaneously.
Okay, here's another one I think we should address. This question comes in. It says, how frequently should I be assessing my vendors? That's a good one.
Sure. Okay. So, well, I mean, at a minimum, it should be done once a year, right? But that's, again, more toward the older paradigm of how cybersecurity and third-party risk was run. So ultimately you want to move your organization, your team toward more frequent assessments of those vendors. Work on moving up that frequency. And I know it's a resource burden on the team, which was why you have to have some kind of technology automation to, address those additional components to get you that information. So having some kind of technology automation component will give you that continuous monitoring aspect, and then you can derive the metrics from that. But again, get those metrics, because you have to devise a process that will deliver to you the metrics so you can assess the vendors in a quantitative sense, both on risk and vulnerability and all those other aspects that I spoke of previously.
Okay, here's one more for you, Ryan. Let's see. Can you set up alerts if a bad event occurred at one of my third parties? If yes, what type of triggers can I set up?
Sure. So with the ability to footprint specific network spaces of interest to you within Lookingglass's technology platforms, you can derive a lot of different alerting capabilities. So it really depends on the frequency you want to be alerted on, as well as what threshold you want to set it at. So with the tick scoring, again, you have the ability to sort of score different network elements or collections of network elements, and then you can also be alerted based on a threshold. So say I was monitoring my payment processor vendor, and I was monitoring their entire organization. I might want to have a lower threshold because I'm just trying to keep a situational awareness of that payment processor. However, say I have a second vendor that's connecting to a business critical part of my organization, and in this case I'm only monitoring a handful of IPs of theirs that are connecting to my network to pull back data. In this case, I'm only monitoring a few IPs, but I want to be alerted if a higher criticality threat is associated with their IPs. So I can have an alert set up within Lookingglass's technology platform that really allows you to sort of craft the exact threshold you want to set to be alerted on. So for instance, in this case, I could say, alert me if a tick score above 75 is aligned against my third-party IP. And then I can have that run at various frequencies. So what I could do is say, again, if it's highly critical to me, I could say run that scan every 5 minutes, run it every hour, run it every hour, every half day, every week, every month, etc. So there's actually a lot of reporting functions that you can have pushed through the system via a simple alert setup. So on the other opposite spectrum, if you want to do continuous monitoring and trending of your third parties, you could actually set up an alert once you footprint all their network space that would show you, the alert would essentially give you a monthly trending report of all the threat activity that's occurred within their space on a monthly basis, or a weekly basis, even if you want it more frequently. So this way you're getting actual metric-driven responses to your alerts that both give you oh no, something really bad happened, I need to go address it immediately, as well as on the opposite spectrum, okay, I want a monthly situational awareness of my relationship with my third-party vendors. And then the other thing think of alerts also as an integration mechanism. So if I want to have alerts sent to a third-party application or tool, say a SIM or a firewall, I could also determine and set up alerts that would push data like that to my other third-party tools that I'm using in my environment.
Okay, here's one more for you, Ryan. Let's see. Is there a specific framework questionnaire like NIST, CSA, SIG you would recommend?
So NIST is a good starting point, but again, a lot of it really depends on what sector you're in, what vertical, and there's lots of common practice information security procedures out there that you can set up that you can also utilize to force your vendors to report, force maybe a strong word, ask your vendors to report on. And again, once you have set up a continuous monitoring program, you're not really relying on them to provide that information for you because you can use other sources of data to sort of craft that picture yourself and get a clearer picture of their security posture. Ultimately, framework questionnaires are driven to push you toward a standard, and this is a good one to start with.
Okay, we've had some good questions coming in. I see there's a couple more, but we're running out of time. We're running short. So let's go ahead and close this up. If we have not addressed your specific question, please understand that we will contact you directly as soon as we end this presentation. So go ahead and send them in if you still have questions. We'll make sure that they get answered. But Ryan, I want to thank you very much for this great presentation today on third-party risk. And I want to thank everyone who attended today's live webcast from Lookingglass. There will be a recording of today's webinar that will be made available on our website under the resources page. If anyone had to cut that came in late or would like to also share this with anyone else, be sure and visit our page. Another reminder in the attachments and links section that we do have additional data there. We have our product data sheet for our Scout Prime platform. There's also a link to our recent press release where it was announced that our Scout Prime platform has become the first threat intelligence platform to implement the newly emerging STIX 2.0 standard. So make sure you look at those, and there's also some of our blogs that are relevant to our Scout Prime platform and third-party risk as well. So make sure you visit those attachments. Also, you can visit our website, which is lookingglasscyber.com. Or if you have any additional questions or would like to contact us directly, you can send us something to sales@lookingglasscyber.com. But again, I want to thank everyone for viewing today's webcast. Be sure and visit our website, and we hope to have you visit the rest of our webinars upcoming in the future. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and close down for today. And again, thank you for viewing.